my supporters. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thanks. All right, well, let's talk about prime costs, right? The one number that restaurant owners need to know to make money, right? And it is the most underappreciated number, I feel, in the restaurant business. And it's your biggest driver. It's your biggest controllable. So that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about prime costs. We're going to talk about what consists of prime costs, how you monitor prime costs, and where you should be, what your prime costs should look like. I do have to say that this is my first time ever talking. I live this stuff, right? I'm a restaurant owner and I live prime costs every day, but I've never presented it before, so bear with me. I'm new at this. Maybe you can give me some feedback on how I did afterwards. So that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to go a very basic kind of entry level, surface level into prime costs, right? And then we could get really deep into the weeds in prime costs, but that would take way more than 30 minutes, which is all we have. So we can set up another conversation if you want to go deeper into it. All right, how many restaurant owners do we have in here? 1, 2, a couple of them. How about managers? How many managers? A couple of you too. Okay, I mean, you guys are really, really important to know where prime costs lie, right? The owner is responsible for keeping that number in line, and the managers are responsible for producing that data to the owner so he can track it. So this is really good. This is really good stuff for you to learn. We've got rising food costs. We've got some sales declining, right? Particularly late at night. I'm hearing a lot that late night alcohol sales are declining across the country. We've got minimum wage rising in some areas, right? We sometimes feel like as owners or as managers, we're the only ones that can do anything to change stuff. And we can't find good employees. So watching prime costs can help you combat all of those. Look, I get it. I'm an operator. I'll share with you today the numbers, how you can get them in line and overcome these challenges so you can start understanding them. So my background is I own Mother's Cantina. I'm getting ready to have we're having our 18th summer, 2007. So, we've had it for a long time, and we worked in the business, my wife and I, expanded it, grew the profits, expanded the business, doubled the size of it. We started learning some hard lessons in the pandemic, right? Taught us hard lessons. We incurred some debt. We found David Scott Peters, who was a restaurant coach, and we joined his Restaurant Transformation Foundations program. We put his systems in place and trained our team, and now we are working on the business instead of in the business. So David helped me so much. I kind of feel like I owe him a life debt, right? So now I've taken on a role with him as a success coach, and I help him find other restaurant owners that might, be looking for the same change and transformation, right? We like to fill the gap. If we feel that restaurant owners are here and we can bring in some outside help, get them to here where they want to be, we see if they're a good fit for membership. So now, since we're working on the business and less in the business, we can really focus on growth. We have the time and the experience and the knowledge. And now we have a life outside of the restaurant. I went to every one of my son's wrestling matches this winter, first time in a long time. And that meant a lot. So, prime costs, the one number you know. We are going to just dive into prime costs. Budget variance and the key restaurant systems will be another conversation. If you're interested in that, I'll put my contact information up there and we can talk about it one-on-one or in a small group, whatever works for you. But today we are just going to discover prime costs. What is it? What makes up prime costs? It's a very simple formula, but how you get there is really important, okay? On one side of the equation, we have gross sales. On the other side of the equation, we have total cost of goods sold, your food and your liquor, along with your total labor, including taxes, benefits, and insurance, okay? We divide those two numbers together and we get a percentage. That's our prime cost. That sounds easy, but it's not easy because you can mess it up pretty quickly. So let's talk about how we get our sales. We need to use gross sales, not net sales. A lot of point of sale systems will give you your net sales, and they're tricky. Every point of sale system gives you different data. So you really have to dig deep and find the right number. And the reason why we use gross sales instead of net sales is because that is the number before comps, voids, and discounts, okay? That's what you intended to sell the product for when you purchased the product. For example, if I have a burger on my menu and it's $10, but I'm doing a half off burger night and I comp $5 from that burger, that was still a $10 burger. It was supposed to be a $10 burger, but I willingly comped the $5. That menu price was $10. The gross sales should still be $10, okay? Now, that comp goes to a different bucket. It should not be taken off the top. That's why we use gross sales. That's with any comps, voids, and discounts. Gross sales is a must. Looking at labor on the other side of the equation, okay? When we pay a line cook $16 an hour, we're not really paying him $16 an hour. We have employment taxes, right? We're paying him more like $18 an hour, right? After everything is factored in. So if you're using $16 an hour and charging your labor on that side of the prime cost equation, you're doing it wrong. Your rent. You can turn the lights on and off all you want. You can tinker with the thermostat all you want, but that electric bill is what it is, right? So we do not include that in prime cost. A lot of questions we get, should me as the owner, should I be in prime cost? Well, that depends. Are you working in the business? Are you doing a job that you would have to pay somebody to do if you weren't there? And if the answer is yes, then you're in the prime cost calculation. If the answer is no, you're just coming in and you're getting in the way like I do at my place. Like they kicked me out of the service bar yesterday. Yeah, John saw it, it was pretty funny. If you're coming in and getting in the way, then you're not part of prime costs, okay? So that's really important. So if you're doing a job, if you're acting the manager, working the floor, working a station, you are in prime costs. If you're not, if you are working on the business, you are not. So where should we be? In the old days, full service restaurant was 60 to 65, quick service 60%. That doesn't work anymore. Our new target is 55%, all right? If you're over 850,000 in gross sales, you need to be, your target is 55%, okay? Those numbers just don't work anymore, right? There's not enough profit if your prime costs are 60 to 65%. So how do we get there, right? What does it look like for a couple different scenarios? So here's a family dining restaurant, right? Total cost of goods sold around 30%. Labor is about 25%. That's a balanced prime cost. We look at maybe a burger restaurant, okay, where they have, it's a scratch meat kitchen, right? Chef-driven menu, where they are prepping a lot, right? Buying a lot of raw ingredients, not bringing things in ready-made, multi-step process to get it out to the customer, but they're saving a lot of money on their food purchasing. So that's how they can get to a COGS of 20. But you can see that the labor is affected, and that's 35%, right? Probably a heavy prep. Chef-driven menu, that happens a lot. Then on the flip side of that, we have our steakhouses, right? Our white tablecloth places. It takes the line cook the same amount of time and energy and pay to flip a $10 burger as a $40 steak, right? So we can make the money up in labor, but we're spending a lot of money on those high items, so our food cost is there. But as you can see, it all filters in to 55%, and that's where we want to be. So this is me. This is where I am. If you guys want to talk about more about prime costs, talk more about budgeting. In order to have an accurate portrayal of your prime cost, you do need three things. Okay, one is you need recipe costing cards. Two is you need a budget. And three is you need to be taking inventory. If you are not taking inventory for a dollar amount, not just to see what you need, not just to give your Cisco order in, right? Not to order on the app. You need to know dollars and cents what is in the business. Then you're not going to get a true representation, because we have to have that standing inventory credit come back in off of your cost of goods sold every month. It has to be there, or else the number doesn't make sense. So those are the three things that you need. Our restaurant coach, David, says the two most important things that every restaurant should have are budgets and recipe costing cards. And the two most important things that restaurants never have are budgets and recipe costing cards. So we need to start working on budgets, right? We need to be budgeting, we need to be forecasting. We need to, as restaurant owners, purchasing by category based on a budget. So that's what we do. That's what David does. He builds budgets for restaurant owners. He teaches them how to use them, and he teaches you how to track it. So you can enter actuals into a budget, see where you swing and hit, and see where you swing and missed. Does anybody have any questions on prime costs, how it's calculated, what it is, anything I might not have covered, because again, it's my first time, I might have gone too fast.
What are the best, I mean, when you talk about prime costs, you've got obviously your cost of goods being food, beverage, and labor. What are the best controls that you've experienced trying to get those? Like when numbers going wrong, right? If your liquor costs are out of control, your food costs are a little bit high, your labor costs are high. What tools are you using to keep those things, get those things back in line?
The answer is you that which we measure improves, right? So we put in different measuring systems. David has a system called Key Item Tracker, right? It's funny how when we have the Key Item Tracker in place at our bar on 28th Street, that the Jameson kind of falls in line with the cost of goods sold where it should be. And when we don't have the Key Item Tracker in, sometimes the Jameson costs, the liquor costs are a little high, right? So Key Item Tracker is fantastic for that.
How does that work?
It's math. It works on math. You just count. I mean, look, what we do is not exciting. It's super boring. We just count stuff, right? And if we're counting it and we're measuring it, it works. So we put in counts. We put in counts. We hold our team accountable for doing counts. We've isolated counts on a Friday before happy hour to a Friday, to a Sunday or a Saturday morning when we can isolate a shift to see if we're experiencing waste, theft, and spoilage, right? There's two kinds of theft in the restaurant industry when it comes to liquor. There's accidental theft and there's on-purpose theft, right? We like to think as restaurant owners we don't have any on-purpose theft, right? We trust our team. But what we do experience is accidental theft. Did that guy have 3 beers or 4 beers? I don't know, I'm gonna charge him for 3. Well, he had 5 actually, and you just gave him 2 for free. You stole 2 from me. You didn't do it on purpose, but you still did it, and that's still my money, and that still affects my prime cost, right? So we have to put systems in place to prevent that. And it's not because our team wants to steal from us. They're not bad people. They just haven't been taught how to do things, right? They haven't been taught ring it, bring it. Ring it up, and then bring it to the guest. When somebody orders, you ring it up, you bring it to the guest. Little things like that, right? All of those will add up to keep your prime costs in line. Thanks.
When you're showing the slides of the different restaurants and the targets to get to the 55 overall and how to differentiate that, how do you determine, like how do I determine at my restaurant that we should be at 35% cost of goods, 20% labor, or 35% labor, 20% cost of goods?
The answer to that is a budget.
Yep.
Everybody's, that 55% prime cost is where you need to be. How you get there is very, very different. We all sell different things. The envelope of our restaurants is very different, right? We all do very different things. But the letter remains the same, right? We're all trying to do hot food hot, cold food cold, clean, safe work environment, wow customer service, incredible product, right? We're all trying to do that. But how we get there is very different, right? All roads lead to Rome, but there's a lot of different roads. So that's why a budget is very, very, very important, right? We need to separate purchasing by category and sales by category. Manager salaries, you might have a manager that also works during low to medium volume times seasonally. He might work as a line cook, right? So your manager salaries might be really high in the winter, but might be astronomically low in the summer. But when we have a budget, we can look at the end of the year, we can look at that green column, and we can see if it all balances out to the prime cost you need. So again, back to budgets. The one word answer to that is have a budget. Anybody else have any questions? Do you have any more? No?
This might be too granular for this format, but how much do you find that your menu engineering plays into that? As far as, say for instance, you have for example, your menus have a lot of items that could be either prepped in-house or you can outsource that prep. Like is it more cost effective to, you know, basically have a higher food cost by having somebody come in pre-prepped, or to keep it in-house and you have higher labor costs?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that does. I mean, that has a ripple effect onto your prime cost. So the question is menu engineering, right? How does that affect, how can that come into effect, and how can you manipulate that to keep your prime costs in line? We have a system that we use, it's John's favorite. It's called the Menu Profitability Monitor, okay? And what we do is we're able to, if you have recipe costing cards, or when you have recipe costing cards, because everybody should have recipe costing cards, we are able to put that into a system that will zoom out, and it will look at your sales versus your use and give you an overall percentage based on how you're selling that product. And then it zooms out even further and looks at your menu as a whole and gives you an ideal food cost based on that menu. So recipe costing cards are step one to menu engineering. And then after that, the menu profitability monitor will be step two. So then you can get your ideal, now you know your ideal food cost, you're able to track your actual food cost. Does that answer your question? Cool. Yeah, great. Anybody else? Any other questions?
Ryan, on your recipe costing card, are you factoring labor?
Yeah, that's what I was getting
What
at.
she's getting to, so like.
Oh, I'm sorry, misunderstood then.
Like a ready-made salsa versus buying the tomatoes, the onions, jalapenos, so on and so forth, and then paying somebody 15, 20, whatever dollars per hour. That's
Set
what
up all those things, yeah.
Right.
Because I find a lot of people when they're figuring, I like this approach because you're considering your total cost of goods sold, like as including your labor for prime cost. So I found that too many operators don't do that, and they realize like, wait a minute, this burrito only has like, you know, $1 worth of ingredients, and I'm selling a ton of them, but I'm not making any money, and I don't know why. And it's like, well, because you've got like 5 guys in the kitchen prepping all day long, and they're costing you $15, $20 an hour.
Correct.
Plus all of your, your insurance and your taxes and all that kind of stuff. And they're like, it's not your food costs and your labor costs to produce that, and it might cost you more to get in, you know, half of those ingredients pre-prepped, and you're still gonna get a great quality product, and your actual cost of goods sold, your total prime cost is gonna go down.
Absolutely, and that comes from the labor side. So again, you know, if we were making the salsa from scratch, it might look like this, right? If we were bringing it in, it might look more like this here, right? And it all blends together, and you can make that decision if you have a budget and you are tracking your labor by category. Then you're able to see what those changes will do, right? Once you have it all mapped out, your budget is your yellow brick road, right? We've all seen the Wizard of Oz, right? Your budget is your yellow brick road, and if you follow the yellow brick road, you're off to see the wizard. And in this case, the wizard is 40-55% prime cost and 15 to 20% net profit based on your gross sales, right? That's where we all want to be. So it's a moving target, but once you nail it down, then you're able to try those scenarios. What if we brought this salsa in instead of made it? What would that do to our prime cost? Any other questions?
Yeah, I think I'll just add on that too, because I mean that's from Ryan's perspective, from my perspective, when we look at our scratch-made menu, we know that we are going to bump up our labor targets for our prep cook. So our prep staff, their percentage that we're going to allocate from our budget to our prep staff is going higher because all the salsa, all the beans, everything is made in that prep kitchen.
It's tremendous
so
labor.
We say, our food cost, instead of at 30%, our target is 23% on food cost. But our prep staff, our money allocated from our budget for that prep staff is definitely higher than a lot of other places.
Yeah.
So that's why
about
Ryan said it's a
5.5%.
moving target, because we know what our targets are in that budget. It's not really specific to a food item, though, I think is what you were asking.
How much you break it down per like you can afford to, like in a steakhouse, for instance, you can afford to run a 40% food cost on a steak because all you're going to do is salt and pepper it and throw it on the grill.
Right.
Whereas on your sides, you might have to run a 15% food cost because
Yeah.
you've got so many different prep, steps going into them, but where you want to hit this overall target for your whole
Right.
budget.
Right. It's more of an overall target. We're not looking at specific food items, but if you really are really focusing on those overall targets, it trickles down into those big batch recipes where they're spending all day. It all sort of trickles down in the
As
end.
long as the final number at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Yep. As long as that green column at the end of your budget says it, you know, there's a couple different things on there, and the prime cost is great. Break-even point is also a good one to calculate, but that's a different conversation. Jason.
Even when you sit down to the granular aspect, there are a lot of owners and brands that will take their prep team and actually talk to them and say from starting from this point to prep this items just for diced tomatoes, how long does it take? And it's the average prep, and then break down what that dollar amounts to the yield, and then with that yield to the ounce, and then break that labor down for it costs this much on labor, and then say, well, if we were to get it pre-diced, then what would that be? But then you then have to weigh that food quality wise. Will it always be consistent as it is in the kitchen? We can say that both ways. What comes in sometimes isn't always consistent when it's a whole product. But it is a good practice if you get to the point of you have major budgets, you have a really good menu, but now you're really dialing in. Can you do that true labor matrix per item of what's prepped, and then break down now what can we reallocate towards something else that's pre-prepped versus do we get that value from the customer because it's scratch made? But that is, a great question.
Yeah, and it's a moving target. You know, to give you an example, we make tons of pico de gallo, okay? And we had the old tomato puncher. So the prep staff was slicing it into rings, using the Punisher that I call it. You know, we're always cleaning up tomato. It looked like a Gallagher show in there sometimes. The tomatoes are really ripe, and it was we were like, there has to be a better way, because we saw what our labor costs were, and so we saw our prep costs were too high on our budget. So we said we have to attack prep. We have to get it lower. So Neely found we bought a $800 RoboCoupe, and it has the pico de gallo dicing attachment, right? You two blades in there, you put it together, and now a batch of pico de gallo that would take an hour and a half now takes 30 minutes. Okay, so we save an hour for every batch of pico de gallo. Yeah, I mean, the ROI on that piece of equipment, 6 months maybe, if not. So, you know, it led us to Unox ovens, right? We have these robots that cook. They're in the back wall over there, and they're one button cooking. Everything's programmed in there. We actually took saute out of our restaurant. We had a burner, 4-burner stove. We took it out. We don't need it anymore because we don't need to do anything with it. Our menu can be done with the Unox. Saves time, saves space, saves labor, and all of that is because we have that number that we're trying to achieve, right? We know what we need to be at prime cost wise. So the better your analytics are, the better decision making you can make. Any other questions about prime costs? No? Well, great. Well, thank you all for being here. If you scan this QR code, that goes to my calendar. I'd love to continue the conversation with you. We can talk about budget variance reports. We can talk about labor discrepancy finder, any other systems that you're curious about that you can use to strategically run your restaurant. I can geek out on that stuff for days. So I'd love to talk to you about it. Thank you. Appreciate you coming. Thank you.